What's up, guys? Welcome to the Amplified Action Podcast. My name is Andre, and I'm here with my buddy Jake. And today we're going to be talking about three paradoxes of high performance: the productivity paradox, the effort paradox, and the speed paradox. We're going to go in order. Do you have any opening thoughts, Jake, on the productivity paradox?
Yeah, I mean, I love paradoxes in general. I feel like paradoxes are the ultimate form of wisdom because when you really dig down deep enough, nothing actually makes sense and everything's like counterintuitive and everything's on a spectrum. So I love framing these in terms of paradoxes. The productivity paradox, I see this all the time. So I spend most of my career in tech and software and product design and working with developers. And especially when it comes to like big, messy tasks, like that are a bit unknown, like you can't estimate how long it's going to take directly, that the Parkinson's law, which I think is a core part of this paradox, is Parkinson's law essentially means like a task is going to expand to fill the time that you've allowed for it to take. And I see this all the time with myself and working with other people, is if you don't put a time box on something, it's just going to take forever to accomplish something. And this is one of the biggest things that I think holds people back when it comes to paradox. And I don't know if we said what the paradox is, but essentially it's the more you work, the less you accomplish is the paradox.
Yeah, I've noticed that the more time you spend, the more time you allow, it really does fill the time. And even if you're not thinking about it in terms of work productivity, you could also look at it where, like, imagine you have 30 minutes to clean your whole house. And imagine, like, okay, I've assigned Sunday to clean my house. It's kind of surprising how quickly you can clean your house if you have a 30-minute deadline, right? You're running around, you're able to like get everything in order like so quickly because you're like, okay, I have to, right? Now, if you're like, okay, I'm gonna clean Sunday, it's going to take all of Sunday. And it's something that the more I look at it, the more I assign actual firm time slots, the better my entire life seems to go. In fact, I have this productivity app that I really like. It's called TickTick. We're not sponsored by TickTick or anything here.
I'm a huge fan of TickTick as well. Yeah, we haven't connected
you
on
use
this
TickTick?
one.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I actually just switched over to, I've been playing with something else. We won't go down that rabbit hole. I just switched over. I'm playing with something else, but TickTick is amazing. A lot of good features built in.
Yeah, and yeah, it's super affordable.
It's like
and it's like
$2 or
really,
$3. Yeah, it sounds like we're sponsored at this point, but we're definitely not. It's like $3 a month or something, if I remember correctly. It's crazy cheap.
Yeah, and like since this is kind of a productivity podcast, I also think that especially if you're like a creator type, having a productivity place to land, right? Like TickTick, where you get to assign all of these things and then like actually like choose a time slot, and then beyond that choose how much time you're actually going to allow for the task. It gives you like all these measurable bits of data while also forcing you to compress things. And when you force compression into the tasks that you're trying to do, it gets done paradoxically, it gets done better, and it definitely gets done faster. So if you don't have something that tracks that for you, you should probably find something. Even if you could do it manually, if you don't want to pay the $2 or whatever it is, you could just be like, okay, I've got 30 minutes to get this bit done, and after 30 minutes I stop. But I really need to get this done. You'll find a way to finish, right? So this productivity paradox stuff is really friggin' real.
It forces decisions, like the time box that you put on things. It forces good decision making and focus. Like there's it's that little bit of extra attention. That's why so many people need 9-to-5s and need managers, because it's like this external pressure being like, well, when are you going to finish? I need it by this time. It forces your focus. When it's left to, if you're trying to start a business, you're going out on your own, or whatever it may be, or just something in your personal life you're trying to focus on. Yeah, like we don't have quite. Like, it's easy to not have quite as much constraints around what you're doing because you're not maybe not framing it as work or whatever it may be, and yeah, then you lose focus, you get distracted. You're not put in a spot where you have to make tough decisions. It's like, okay, I have 15 minutes left. I got to finish this. What can I do right now? That little 15 minutes changes everything. Like that's where the secret is.
Yeah, that's some built-in Pareto principle stuff right there. The 80-20 rule. Like it just forces 80-20 rule like so hard, right? It's just so effective. Sorry, guys. All right. Yeah, so let's talk about like our strategies that we can do to actively counteract this Parkinson's law productivity paradox, right? I think that we already kind of talked about time blocking, like creating the time pressure, right? The other thing that we can do is get very clear on what we actually need to prioritize. Do you have any opening thoughts on that one?
For sure. This is exactly the way I've approached it in my personal life. Like I live through time blocking. Like every Sunday I wake up, I attempt to time block the whole week. Sometimes I won't do like every day the whole time, and I generally do it during specific hours because I do like to be a bit more flexible when it comes to like family time and stuff like that. I don't time block those explicitly, but I do. It's like a larger time block, but there's no like specific task associated with it. And so I do that at the beginning of every week. It's like, here's when I'm going to work out. Here's this task. And then when it comes to the priority of things, like this is where I probably spend the most time iterating for myself, is trying to figure out like how to properly group things and bucket things. Like sometimes I've done around goals where it's like, okay, so here's sort of this goal that I'm trying to accomplish. Sometimes it's much deeper and goes into like values. It also helps you put a value on some things that are hard to put a value on, like spending time with family or something. Like that's a value. Like, do I have a specific goal? Well, yeah, I could break it down into smaller goals, but just the act of being present with my kids alone is something I really want to focus on. So just like having a label for that and calling it out as a value makes it easy to prioritize and move things around. And there's in my head there's a priority order to things, and that helps me figure out my time blocks. The other thing that I think is really interesting, though, is like just because, so say family is top priority, like it is for me, like everything comes back to that. That doesn't mean it's the top priority when I wake up at 4:30 in the morning because they're sleeping, right? So the top priority is then get some focus work in or something. But as soon as, a certain time rolls around, well, then I shift the focus. So it's not always, 1 through 10 as far as the priority goes. Like you have to look at it in terms of what is the priority at that specific time.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the idea of like doing rough blocks, and then for things that are intangible, like spending time with family, it's very important to block it out, especially if you're doing something that has it feels like an all-encompassing purpose, like creating a business, or like entrepreneurship is really tough when it comes to creating boundaries around it. So having prioritizations by blocks and by days is very valuable to kind of work in, just work in the prioritization and have maximum of total effect across like an entire week. Oh, one more thing that I think that is pretty cool is you need to be understanding what distracts you and what blocks you. And it could be a person, it could be a thing. Most of us struggle with our phones, right? So, like, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you don't get kicked out of your like productivity sprints. Because if you do like a productivity sprint, you've created like a short time block, you have your clear prioritization, but you still like open up your phone and get distracted, or open up your emails and get distracted, and it feels like work when you open up the emails, but it's not efficient, right? We can't just be bouncing from task to task. We need to set a challenging time block in which we can realistically accomplish what we're trying to do, and then have that clear prioritization, and then recognize and cut out the distractions that get in the way of what we're currently prioritizing, right? Like when I have my family time block for my kid, I try to put my phone somewhere else the same way that I try to put my phone somewhere else when I need to do deep work that's productivity oriented, right? So you have to like track what's actually distracting you, because the last thing you want is to be bouncing back and forth and not really accomplishing any of the things on your priority list. And you could have three super important priorities for yourself and still and like bounce between them and get nothing done, right? And that's not how we're going to maximize our output.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot because I've gotten into the trap of like over optimizing, which then becomes a distraction from actually getting things done. And I used to have this master theory about that time tracking because it's so hard to measure things. You like we want to shift towards measuring things that we are in control of, right? Focus we are in control of, and we're in control of time and focus, how much time we spend focusing. So I had this master theory that the one thing I needed to track was like where does my time go and how focused am I on it. And I actually tried to set up a system where I have an Apple Watch and I had this timer app on it and I could like quickly switch between things, and I would literally try to track like, oh, I'm being present with my kid, and like flip over on my watch, or like now I'm doing this, and it was just such a disaster and such a distraction that it took away from the purpose. So I've since abandoned all that and gone back to time blocking. I retroactively update my time blocks too. Like I have a time block as like a schedule. Here's what I think, and then I go back and update with what actually happened. We'll save the tool discussion because that's why I switched from TickTick, or I'm playing with switching from TickTick, is because of being able to retroactively update and like keep comments and stuff. But we'll save that for another time. The blockers thing too. Yeah, the phone. I mean, you called out like the little distractions. The phone, that made me think of one thing too. Like both of us are growing accounts on X, and when work starts to overlap with social media, it's really complicated because it's very easy to get. You're like, well, I'm being productive right now because I'm growing my social media account, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, what am I doing? Like I'm not now. I'm totally off on another track. So, like, gotta be careful with that. That's part of the game. The other one that comes to mind, which is something that I've had to be really conscious of myself, is it like is a hard conversation blocking you? Is it not making a decision? Like if you're procrastinating and there's like a bad feeling in your gut where you're just like, oh, I just don't want to do this, or I just don't know what to do, I'm confused. Like chances are you just have to face something. Like you just have to like make a decision. You have to have the conversation. You have to, whatever it may be, and that alone. I mean, we're drifting off, but don't consider. I mean, to take it back to the productivity paradox, and the more you work, the less you get done. If you're just sitting there spinning your wheels, quote unquote, working, but you're not actually getting anything done. Yeah, look for that blocker. Look for the difficult thing you just need to get out of the way to make sure that you're being more productive, because then you're going to end up working less.
Yeah, there's this part of like the productivity thing, right, where we think that like the little other work distraction bit is it's pretty tough to overcome, right? And usually when you're stalling and you're doing something like we already talked about like the X social media bit, right? And we're growing accounts there. Something that I've found happens for me is that I'll like get lost in like the replying to comments or going out and commenting on other accounts, because that's a part of the growth game if you guys aren't familiar with how social media accounts work. And usually if I'm stuck there and I'm constantly monitoring it, it probably means I have something bigger and less confrontable that I need to do. That's usually something like recording a video course, or like going and doing something that's a little bit less pleasant, like doing cold outreach to people, or any of the other things that you're just gonna avoid. And for me, it's fun. It's funny because we're on a video podcast, right? And I'm like, I over optimize the hell out of everything before I turn record on the camera. so like that's something that's a struggle for me because I'm like, okay, so like I'm putting myself out there on video, so I need to make sure that I'm on point, when in reality you should just be hitting record. You got to just press record, as that one what's the I don't remember the YouTube channel that says you got to just press record. Anyway, but yeah, you have to confront whatever it is that's taking up mental real estate, because if you don't go and confront whatever it is that's taking up mental real estate, you're just going to end up in a situation where you're just soft procrastinating on everything, and you're just like letting this, what would have been for me an hour of recording to create a YouTube video or like some video course, and it turns into something that just like stretches out and it takes the whole morning. But it didn't have to take the whole morning. It only had to take 60 minutes. And yeah, that's it's just super important to look at it that way.
Yeah, and we're talking about high performance. That's what high performers do, right? Like they don't make things take longer than they need to. They have an intuitive understanding, or maybe sometimes not just intuitive, but a logical, reasoned understanding of priorities and when it's worth spending the time and when it's not worth spending the time. And any time you are procrastinating, like stop, ask yourself, how can I accomplish more in less time? You always can. Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's go over to the effort paradox. I'll let you start this one.
All right. So we kind of roughly define this as what looks like effortless action is actually the result of volume and practice. I think this is 100% true. If you have developed mastery in anything in your life, this will intuitively make sense to you, where other people are like shocked and it seems like magic, and you're like, well, it's not that hard. Like, you just do this, and then you try to teach somebody, and you're like, oh, wait a second. Like, this is actually way harder than I thought it was, because it's that volume and it's the practice. It's one of the most valuable things you can do, and valuable things to understand, because when we're looking at other people, or even taking advice from other people, if they don't understand this paradox, they might give really crappy advice, because it's often a lot harder than the person thinks it is.
Oh, for sure. There's so many invisible reps. You could have like 100 failed takes to get your first decent one. And that can happen in video, that can happen in writing, that could happen in shooting your shot, dating, like there's all kinds of different things where, like, you're like, say the dating thing, because that's super relatable for everybody, right? So imagine that you've tried to talk to 100 people, and then the last one takes, right? And it seems like to that person that you have a lot of ability to speak to people of the opposite sex, right? But that's not natural. It takes a lot of reps. It's the same with like any things in the physical domain. It's the same with things in the intellectual domain. Like somebody who's very well spoken, like even if they don't have like shown competence, like 100 videos that they've recorded, but if they've been an extroverted person who like goes out and talks to people, and they've been doing that their whole lives, they've probably got 20, 30 times as many reps as somebody who's a little bit more introverted. And that ability to speak and to connect with people, it looks effortless to them, or when they do it, right? And it looks effortless from the outside. But there are all of these like related reps, right? Those related reps are like really huge. And you could see that in like people who transition over to social media after being like a marketing expert for 2 decades. They go in and they understand things immediately, and it seems like, oh, this person gets it. They immediately got it. Like, no, they had a huge, deep skill set that's just showing up here. Like, somebody who's done sales for 10 years, you better believe they can just like walk into any room and be able to talk to people, even if they're not selling people. So there's like a lot of invisible reps, and like we have something written down about there are very few natural experts. I don't really think that there's a such thing as a natural expert. There's people who have a tendency to want to do a certain thing, and then they're willing to go out and get all those invisible reps. I think that's really what it comes down to, with the exception of like physical genetics and physical domain things.
Right. Yeah. Nature versus nurture is something we could argue forever. And the bottom line is like, who cares? Like, we know that putting in effort will increase your results. So just focus there and yeah, take whatever luck you got from the grab bag for sure. And it comes down to you just can't expect immediate results. It's like two things I pulled out from what you said. Like, one, don't expect immediate results. Don't compare yourself to somebody else who is successful very fast, because you just don't know what went into that yet. The invisible reps, you didn't see them. And then the second thing is, it's a little bit of like playing to your strengths, or like understanding your experience and seeing how you can take that experience and apply it to a new situation.
Yeah, for sure. So like let's go into how we can directly counteract this effort paradox thing. So we have a few things. We need to change our expectations of results, because most of the time the results are a result of a lot of invisible reps. So we just have to understand that there's probably 10 times as much work than is visible. If we're like going and we're trying to like copy somebody else, we're going to need to do all of those invisible reps that might not be visible from the surface, right? There's all these habits and repetitions that we're just going to need to do. And yeah, that's just expect it to take longer, because there's work that's invisible and you're going to have to do it.
Yeah, this one's very near and dear to my heart as well, because my name's Jake. I go by Systems Jake on social media. That's all my accounts. And delays are a core part of systems thinking. And this is the thing that messes everybody up, is they respond too quickly to things. You have to know the delay between when I start something and when that information arrives, and the way the feedback loop works. Everybody's just impatient. And if you don't account for delays, you're going to over optimize, and that is just as bad as not optimizing at all. In fact, many times worse, because it's this curve that just skyrockets up, where you just keep trying to fix something that is, don't fix what isn't broken. Like, that's exactly what that means.
Yeah. And another thing is that we can growth mindset our way to having this effort paradox not matter. We view everything as like needed repetitions, and we don't get concerned about the results, like you alluded to earlier here. So another thing that we need to be careful of is just we need to understand the biases of the information that we're consuming, especially when it comes to when we're trying to do something that someone else has already done, like built a business, like learned sales, nailed their marketing. There's a lot of different things that go into all of that. And we can't just blindly follow their advice, and we have to get context. And then we have to see how close their story is, for lack of a better word, how close their background is to our own, and see, okay, well, how close am I? If you're not anything like that person in the background or the tendencies or the natural like willingness to do work on certain stuff, then it's not going to be one-to-one. And it's really important to understand that, so that you can understand just how much invisible work is going to be required, and whether or not their advice can even apply to you.
Right. You got to read between the lines. This is the most important thing you can do for yourself, is understand that not everybody's advice is going to be good, even if they're successful, even if they have, proven methods and you've seen the results. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You have to read between the lines on where are they at, what do they value, how are they communicating it, does it relate to you? It definitely is not always going to, and that's also on the flip side why there's so much value in people telling their own stories, right? Like there's a million people selling the same type of thing, but the way they talk about it, the way they explain it, the way they teach others is so relative to their personal story that it's valuable.
Yeah, that it really helps people to like connect with you and make people don't probably I know I do it purposely, but people probably don't go out and look for an exact or a similar story before they go and they find a mentorship relationship. But for me, it's very intentional. And I think that it's valuable to have all those stories out there so you can kind of like be like, okay, that person has a lot of similarities to the way I view the world, or that person had a very similar set of circumstances to my own. We're probably a better fit than average. So let me go and see how this guy did it. So you're just upping your probability of consuming the right information and kind of setting the right plan, you know?
For sure. Yeah, that was a fun. I'm looking back at the paradox, the effort paradox. What looks like effortless action is the result of volume and practice. It's fun how much we pulled out from that little snippet there. It comes all the way down to like, yeah, how do you look for information? Who do you interact with? Your personal story. That's good stuff. We have one more paradox. That is the speed paradox. Essentially, you often need to slow down to speed up. And this one's a little bit funny because our first one was all about the more you work, the less you accomplish. We talked a lot about accelerating time frames to get more done, and now we're saying the opposite. So we have a little paradox inside of our paradoxes, which is how they always seem to work out. So you got to each look at each one of these in their own little windows and pull out the wisdom that you can pull out from it. But yeah, slowing down sometimes is going to speed you up. Curious to get your initial take on that.
Yeah, I actually think that there's some differences between those two paradoxes, and to me the main one for the speed paradox is that the reason why we're slowing down is different than the reason why we tend to slow down if we're looking at productivity. I think that with the speed paradox, the reason it's a paradox is because we need to slow down enough to capture information and to internalize lessons and knowledge and take some breathing room between reps, so to speak, so that we can actually improve and do things better. To me, that's the heart of the speed paradox. You see it all the time with kids. Like they go fast. They just like, oh, fast, 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 fast. And with mine, I'm like, okay, little man, we need to slow down here because you skipped a bunch of questions in your effort to impress me. You didn't impress me. You got to slow down to make sure that you're hitting all of the points that you need to hit. And if you don't hit all of the points that you need to hit, then you're going too fast. And the same applies to all kinds of different domains, right? Like the easiest thing that people would probably understand immediately as like a metaphor is, if you have to run 5 miles and you're sprinting the first quarter mile, you're going to have a rough 5 miles. Like that's like you just have to look at more things in terms of what's my appropriate speed, and picking your appropriate speed and having time to slow down and reflect when necessary, but don't get stuck there. You need to make sure that you're getting everything that you can out of each attempt at whatever you're doing.
Right. It just made me think of when you're talking about kids and going too fast. It's definitely my kid too. And the first thing I thought of was Lego. My daughter's obsessed with Legos, and it's a perfect example where it's like you missed one step because you were going too fast. The whole thing is interconnected, and you have to literally undo the entire thing. Like, talk about not being productive is redoing something like that has these like everything stacked on top of itself. Yeah, all super good points. And yeah, you're gonna miss things if you're just going too fast. You're just gonna miss information, which, to be fair, it's a skill set in itself to know when you should speed up and maybe ignore some of the details. There is a time for that. Knowing when it's the time, that's important. Probably not when you're initially learning something, not when something's extremely high leverage or high value. So you don't want to go so fast that you miss the important things, and you also don't want to go so fast that you burn out. So you have to pace yourself. And I say this all the time, replying to people in X, is like, rest is work, and it depends on which way you lean, but it is for me. I have a tendency towards burnout. I'm always trying to do things. I'm always pushing, and then I burn out, and then I have to slow down. And I've learned that lesson many times in my life. Still learn it every now and then. Again, still, but it really is like sometimes it can feel like, for me, it can feel like work to sit down and relax and do something that's actually good for my body and mind to like recover. And it's so important though. Like when we're talking about high performers and productivity, you have to do that. You have to balance it out.
Yeah, you're looking at sustained output. You really need to have sustained output if you want to be a high performer. And the way that you sustain it is by properly making sure that you get your recovery and rest, both physically and mentally. If you do nothing but work, and you get your 8 hours of sleep, unless you're Alex Hormozy or someone like that, you're probably not balanced enough. Like, and like something that he says is that, well, the reason why I can keep going like this is because to me, this is the game. And fair enough for him, but he also doesn't have children, and that's a completely different situation than people like you and me that have a different set of priorities that has to be integrated in there, right? So you have to kind of internalize that and realize that you're going to need to rest and recover so you have mental reset. You need to actually not burn out so that you can be emotionally available. If you're just like you end the day and you're just like, ugh, it's not a good situation to effectively do the whole raising kids thing. It's also not particularly fun to live that way, to be teetering on the edge of burnout all the time. I actually put number one on my list is like mental reset stuff. Like on my to-do list, it's like number one is make sure to wind down by 9:30. Like wind down. Like I have my TickTick notification. It's like start winding down, and it just like pops up at like 9 o'clock. So I'm like, okay, all right, let me go like brush my teeth, switch to my glasses, get ready to wind down, turn off the screens, So you make sure that you're getting the recovery that you need, and just be mindful of what's actually like going on in your life to make sure that you don't miss things and you don't burn out, and you do something that's sustainable and at a pace where you can keep improving. Because there's a time for just like going gung-ho and just like really, really the season of progress, right? Or the day of progress. Like I crush my Mondays. Monday is a really, really productive day for me. But I can't do the same thing on Wednesdays because I have different priorities on those days, right? And kind of picking your time slots to be reflective versus doing something that just requires a lot of hard work is, I think, pretty important to do.
Right. So many good points there that I want to follow up on. And you like, I feel like you either masterfully did it on purpose or naturally connected like all of our paradoxes together, and what you just said, or all the lessons there, like the Hormozy, or I don't think I've said his name out loud. Hormozy. Hormozy. It's a values thing, right? clearly this guy values hard work, hustling, like building an empire, building money, like etc. And those are totally fine things to value. And if that's who you want to be, you might be able to take his advice like verbatim, right? If you have if you have kids, you have family, you have other priorities in life, like you're just not geared that way and it doesn't feel good to go that way. There's value in what he says, but you have to put it in context. And that might be Mondays, right? Like Mondays is my go mode, or Wednesdays, or whatever it may be, or this hour, this time block is this mindset that I'm putting on. This is how I'm accelerating things, but then I'm going to flip it off and be XYZ person after that. And so important is like, they're going to give advice and it's good advice, but it's only good advice like in specific context. And we're really focused on we're talking about the speed paradoxes, right? So it's like, we're focused on taking breaks and resting, slowing down. And that is so key because so much of common productivity advice is the polar opposite, where it's just go as fast as you can. Yeah. And then you tied it back to the original one to talking about Parkinson's law and time boxing, right? So time boxing when to speed up, time boxing when to slow down, or time blocking, excuse me, not time boxing, maybe
it does the same
similar
thing.
things. Yeah, closely related. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool how these all kind of come together in the end like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely make time to reflect, make time to improve, make time to get shit done. Like there's room for all of these things, and these are all paradoxes because every block of time is different, and your mental landscape will be different, and your biases will be different. So that's why it all feels like paradoxes. But there's ways to break it down to make all of these things still work within the context of your week. Yeah. So anyway, you have any closing thoughts, or are we done here?
I think we got this one. This was a really fun episode. I like this framework, and I mean I love paradoxes. I'm a sucker for paradoxes. I could probably sit here all day and do this.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.